This is the CitizenLink Report.
If you find our insights helpful, would you support our video efforts? Your gift of $25 or more goes a long ways. Covers the crew, lights, cameras, all that. Just click on Donate. Thanks from all of us. You may remember President Clinton saying he thought abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. Well, so far it appears it's still only legal. This is the CitizenLink Report. Hi, I'm Stuart, Shepard, along with Carrie, Earl, who tracks life issues for us. Hi, Carrie.
Hi, Stuart.
I want to give just a warning to our viewers before we start. We're going to talk about details, the sad and troubling details of what happens at abortion centers across the country, and very specific cases. This is not appropriate material for younger children. Frankly, I'm not sure I'm old enough to go through some of this. I read through one of the grand jury reports, and it is dark and disturbing what happens at abortion clinics every day in this country. First, let's talk about a case out of Maryland.
Well, this case out of Maryland is heartbreaking, not that others aren't, but this particularly as it involves a 29-year-old woman by the name of Jennifer Morbelli, and she died February 7th. She was pregnant. Her obituary lists her preborn daughter, Madison, as dying with her. This is a woman who was a school teacher in New York City who was diagnosed with a problem with her pregnancy. In New York, she could not get a late-term abortion. So she went to Maryland where she did have an abortion. She died from complications from that abortion, and her baby died as well. What we know about this case, Stuart, is that the Maryland medical examiners confirmed that she did die as a result of the abortion. They know where the abortion took place, but they don't know the name of the abortionist for certain. The location of the abortion is a center that is run by Leroy Carhart, and that is a name that some of our viewers may be familiar with. He's pretty notorious, late-term abortionist. He left Nebraska several years ago when they passed a late-term abortion ban. He set up shop in Maryland where they have more lenient laws about late-term abortion, and he has not been confirmed as the abortionist that committed this act, but most certainly Mrs. Morbelli did die from a legal, safe abortion, as did her preborn baby. Very, very sad story.
Carhart, of course, is the namesake of a Supreme Court ruling on that.
He is. The ban on partial birth abortion was passed in Nebraska, was struck down by the U.S. Supreme Court in one hand, and it was upheld later by the U.S. Supreme Court. And we do have a federal ban on partial birth abortion, but that's his namesake. And again, he is probably the most notorious abortionist in the United States at this time.
And we've seen many stories about abortion centers being cited for health code violations. Let's talk about the one in North Carolina.
Well, the one in North Carolina, and again, these are not unusual circumstances for abortion clinics to be cited for things. This is one in Charlotte where the health department in North Carolina did a surprise inspection, which apparently is a good idea to do in the abortion industry from time to time. And based on that inspection, they found a number of code violations, including failure to train the staff in how to use medical equipment, failure to lock up medications, including nitrous oxide, which is laughing gas, which is what your dentist may use when you have dental work, failure to properly sterilize instruments, and failure to maintain sanitary conditions. They actually found dried blood in some of the examination rooms. So again, this is not unusual. This is an industry that preys on women during a difficult time in their life. It is an industry that is often not regulated. It's not as regulated as possibly a nail salon or a vet in your state that takes care of animals. So this is an issue that pro-lifers need to be aware of because it's happening, could be happening in your backyard.
And that's an interesting observation. I get the impression that women who go to a Planned Parenthood or an abortion clinic, abortion cellar of any kind, have an expectation that they have to meet the same regulations, the same rules that would go with any outpatient surgery center. But across the country, that's not necessarily true.
No, each state is going to have its own regulations on this. And that's why when we see cases like this, it's important for folks to pay attention. What's happening in your backyard? In our backyard here, Stuart, we've had a lawsuit filed here in Colorado Springs against the Planned Parenthood here in Colorado Springs in our neighborhood. Alliance Defending Freedom has filed a lawsuit on behalf of a woman who says in November, according to her suit, that she went to the local Planned Parenthood here in Colorado Springs to have an abortion, and they forced her to have an abortion after she changed her mind. She claims that she asked for anesthesia. They did not give that to her. She changed her mind, and they forced her to do that. Secondly, she claims that they left parts of the baby inside of her. And I'm sorry to be so graphic, but this is not an unusual complication with abortion in this nation.
And to be clear, her claims are all coming out of the lawsuit, and that's what we're citing here. As far as that last fact, which is troubling, that's from the ER doctor. I mean, he came out and gave a statement, wrote a statement about this, and gave his testimony about what condition she was in when she got to the emergency room.
According to the lawsuit, that's correct. And the statement that was filed by the ER doctor, she turned up at the ER locally 2 days later. She had a severe infection, high fever, had to have risky emergency surgery, and he called it a case of patient abandonment because there was no protocol for her to go back to that Planned Parenthood and have follow-up. What happens so many times, Stuart, is the abortion center has to bring in doctors. One of the good things, if you will, that has happened with the pro-life movement in recent years is doctors who kill babies for a living have a bad reputation. And so what often happens is they're not willing to be public, they're not willing to live in the community, so they have to bring people in, they call them circuit riders. Now, we do not know anything about the abortionist that is named in this lawsuit. It is anonymous, but what we do know was, according to the ER doctor, there was not a protocol for this woman to have any emergency follow-up. That is not a doctor-patient relationship. And for the ER doc to call that patient abandonment, that's a pretty solid charge within this case.
And something else the ER doctor pointed out, he said, typically in this kind of case, you would do a pathology. That is, you would look at what was taken out and decide what that was, whether it might be an ectopic pregnancy or what. But he said, according to the abortion seller, they don't do that. They just look at it and make a determination. They don't actually examine it in a medically proper way.
And again, each state has its own set of regulations. This is why it's important, if you care about this issue, if you care about protecting women, as long as abortion is legal, and it is at the moment, our hope is that one day it won't be because of the death of children and the injury and death of women. But to know what's going on in your state, pay attention to what the newspaper is saying, pay attention to what the laws say. And again, this is only the tip of the iceberg of some of the things that we've seen in the last year or so.
And perhaps the worst case we've seen was in Philadelphia. There's a new documentary out that offers details of what was going on there. We're going to take a look at some clips from that.
But they made it seem like it was so okay. It was just so okay to just go in there and get it done as long as you had the money.
I don't know specifically how much he was charging. That goes into some detail in the grand jury report. But certainly the prosecution in Philadelphia, the prosecutors contend that it made him a millionaire.
The adult victim, prosecutors say, was 41-year-old Karnamaya Monger, who died in 2009 after receiving an overdose of anesthesia. The nearly 300-page investigative report says paramedics who arrived at the clinic found her lifeless and said Gosnell was just standing there, not doing anything.
In this woman's death, one of his office workers began the anesthesia process. Not a nurse, not a professional anesthesiologist, but just an employee of the clinic who had begun working with the doctor and sort of got on-the-job training. The problem was that, you know, when you have, especially with anesthesia, when you have somebody who has been given too much, you don't have a very big margin of error to try to save someone's life.
The grand jury, in addition to reporting their findings of the horrific and barbaric treatment of women and young girls, you know, they were very upset and angered by what they thought was a disparate treatment, that the treatment of these patients was, in their mind, only allowed due to the fact that the supermajority of the patients were poor, that they were minorities, that they were brown and black women.
That clinic that they're talking about belonged to Kermit Gosnell. It had not been inspected in more than a decade and a half, we've learned.
Even though there were regulations on the books in Pennsylvania for the abortion industry to be regulated. Now, this story came out of an investigation and a grand jury report, and you've read that report, so have I. It is chilling. The grand jury called this abortion center a house of horrors. Reading that grand jury report is like a horror novel, and you know that. It's nauseating.
Except it's real.
It's real. It's real life, and this is what has happened there. This abortionist, Kermit Gosnell, faces 8 counts of murder, 1 for a woman that died in that clinic, reportedly due to an overdose of drugs, and also for 7 babies who were born alive. And they were killed after they were born alive. And it's just gruesome to even think about what this grand jury found. And again, these are not pro-life people. These are not folks with an axe to grind against the abortion industry. This was the district attorney of Philadelphia that came forward and said, and you saw him in that video clip, and said, this is atrocious. How could we let this happen? Now, there are 9 other people that have been charged. Kermit Gosnell's trial starts March 4th. So that's right around the corner. The state expects some of those former employees of his to testify against him. He is also charged with handing out controlled substances, the prescriptions for controlled substances, without physical examinations, without a relationship with the patient, often making up names allegedly for how people could get their drugs. But again, this is just perhaps the tip of the iceberg of what is happening. And this documentary is so powerful because it does take you behind the scenes into what was found by this grand jury.
And that documentary is called 3801 Lancaster, which is the street address of the clinic of his center. And it offered various services there. But it's available free online. You can watch it. We'll provide you a link for that at the end of this video. We want to show you another clip from it that raises some of the obvious questions that should have been asked.
How was it that this clinic was allowed to operate in this condition? And how was it that this doctor was allowed to practice medicine?
The state did discipline health department officials after the raid on the Gosnell clinic and after the grand jury report came out because plainly someone wasn't doing their job.
The Department of Health, who regulates the facilities, had the authority to revoke the facility approval for this clinic. Quite simply, they had the authority to shut it down.
The grand jury found and reported that the last time representatives of the State Department of Health had actually gone on site to view physically the Women's Medical Society was in 1993. How is it that we have more oversight in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania of women's hair salons and nail salons than we do over abortion clinics?
So Stuart, we do want to encourage people to watch this documentary. Again, it is graphic. It does have some graphic pictures. It's not recommended for young children or perhaps people with weak stomachs, but it is so important for us to understand the horror that is behind abortion, that women are subjecting themselves to this procedure, if you will, at a time in their lives when they feel like they don't have any other choice. It always ends in a dead baby, and as we're seeing from these cases, it often ends in an injured or it can end with an injured woman and sometimes even in death. Women don't realize that. So please watch the documentary. It's only 21 minutes. And then we would encourage you to share it with your state lawmakers. It is a viral link. You can email it to your state lawmakers. Even if your state has abortion industry regulations, they can be beefed up to see that this sort of thing doesn't happen. If your state does not have abortion center regulations, all the more reason for your state government to be aware of what can happen. And this documentary is a great way to tell that story.
All right. Here is the website for that documentary. Again, it's free online. It's about 20 minutes long. If you are pro-life, you need to watch this documentary. And frankly, if you're in favor of abortion, you need to watch this documentary to find out what it is you're supporting with your political voice as well as perhaps your money. Carrie, what can people do? How do we take action?
Well, I would suggest to be educated and again to share this. This is a documentary that really is going to rock people, I think. I don't know that people have seen a story like this that is not only well documented, it's not fiction, it's well documented, but it is well told. And it is an opportunity for us again to open the door into a dark industry and really to shine a light in it. So I would say watch that documentary, share it with people, and share it with your state government in hopes of getting some better protections. As long as abortion is legal, we do need to make sure that it is not hurting women this way.
And we need to continue to speak into the political process as well.
Absolutely. And again, this is an eye-opener for people. I think people will be shocked to see this story. Keep an eye on the news, and we'll come back and bring reports as this Gazanel trial goes forward. But again, women's lives, children's lives are at stake, and our goal is to make abortion unthinkable and illegal, and we'll continue to that end. But in the meantime, we've got to also face the fact that this is a horrendous industry that has its way too often in this nation.
All right. Carrie, thank you for your insights and for keeping track of this difficult issue for us. We appreciate that. And thanks to all of you who have written to share your thoughts and your comments with us. We do read every note that comes in. You may write to us at mail@citizenlink.com. We encourage you to pray for the families that have been impacted by the stories we just shared with you. There are husbands and parents and siblings and nephews and nieces who are all dealing with the tragedies that can come from abortion sellers. Pray for them to see the light of truth and also to find some peace in their hearts that can only be found, frankly, through the gospel. And remember, stand tall and be heard.